Hello, everyone. My name is Philippa Kowarsky, and I've been in the documentary world for a long time, so it's hard for me to introduce myself in one line, but I've been a sales agent, a producer, co-producer. Some of the films I made, I was the gatekeepers. I was involved with Flea Collective, and we worked on The Act of Killing, The Look of Silence, and then I worked for the BBC. I headed Storyville for a bit, and I'm doing all sorts of other stuff now. It's not about me, so I'm cutting that short. And I'd like to introduce you to one of my favorite filmmakers in the world. And this is in no order of importance, I think, or almost, but this is Petra Costa, who is an artist, a Brazilian, a filmmaker, a believer, a thinker, and someone who's made incredible films. Her film, The Edge of Democracy, was nominated for an Oscar. It also won her a Peabody. All her films have been everywhere in the world, the biggest and most important festivals, so that would be Sundance, Venice, IDFA, Telluride, and DocFest Sheffield, of course. So the new film, Apocalypse in the Tropics, is showing tomorrow, right?
8:30.
8:30 in the evening, I hope. Okay, good. Just worried for a sec here. Good, so let's start chronologically with your very first and personal film, Elena. So, Elena is the first feature film you made, as we said. When I watched it, I felt that you had no choice but to make it. But then it was a documentary, and I thought you were going to be an actress. So how did it all start?
Well, thank you so much, Philippa. I've been a huge admirer of Philippa for a long time. She was the sales agent of my dreams that I never had. And wanted to thank Sheffield for this beautiful opportunity, humbling opportunity of being here. Raul was the first person to program any film of mine, which was Elena. And that film, as you say, was not a choice. But before, I wanted to say a little bit of how hard it was for me to understand and decide what I wanted to do as a work. Because I was an actress, but I got into theater school and felt that I knew very little about the world to be able to express something about it. And so I wanted to study history, politics, philosophy, psychology, and I was very schizophrenically split for a while until I found anthropology. And I fell in love with anthropology because coming from a country like Brazil, where history is not as adequate a discipline as anthropology, where to understand our people and from the inside. So the ethnographic principle that to say something about someone, you have to really embed yourself with them, fascinated me. And I started using the camera to do ethnographic work and to interview people. So I first fell in love with the cameras as just a device, but a key into the other. I did like film, cinema, but it felt very impossible as a woman.
I can relate. I started similarly as well. It felt impossible.
Yes.
If there are any young women in this room, it's not impossible. Go do it.
And so I started filming this ethnographic work, and then I was like, oh no, now you have to edit. I wish I could skip this part. So I just filmed many things and would not edit them until I decided to make a short film. I worked with other things. I did a master's in social psychology, but then suddenly I came back to filmmaking by deciding to make a experiment in a first I was assistant director to Giuseppe Agiglia,
Ah,
who did
okay.
Elite Squad films that I have very different opinions from. But when I met the Super 8 camera, it was my film teacher, because you had not to develop into any content, but actually capture instances, like 3-minute moments, and really think about the image and not, there's no sound, right? I was working with Super 8 with no sound. So that, I never studied cinema, but for me, the Super 8 was my cinema teacher. And Elena came from a desire to speak about what I felt was the most important thing I had to say, to transmit to any other human being before I died. And that was the journey into understanding the death of my sister, Elena, who died of suicide when she was 20 and I was 7. And I, at first, tried to capture that externally, even though what I really wanted was to express what I had lived through internally, but I didn't feel I had the right to. So I interviewed everyone who knew Elena. There were 50 people. And I worked with an amazing editor in Brazil called Idela Creta. And when she saw that material, she was like, none of this matters. There's only the interview with your mother that interests me. But what do you want to say? And that's when I started writing this script.
So this film is a journey, as you can feel already, to that's intimate, gutsy, and revealing. Do you want to talk about the lessons you felt or learned making it?
Well, first, this image that you see at the end was the first image that came to my mind when I thought of making the film. Even before I knew what it was about, I was like, I want to make a film where there's this image of these women, as in that Klimt painting of the women, I forgot the name, together, enmeshed and laid down on the ground. So this image was haunting me. And then I had a dream about Elena that I described in the beginning of the film. I was writing a fiction film at the time about a woman that is haunted, very inspired in Virginia Woolf, who's being here in the UK is very meaningful to me because she's a huge inspiration. And that this dream of Elena imposed itself, and the film became about Elena. And the lessons, I think, what time does this mean?
It means we have another hour.
Okay.
That's okay.
And
That's scary stuff.
And we've been on.
We're okay.
Okay.
Time is on me. That's on me. And we're keeping time for Q&As. So anyone wants questions or anything, just keep them or send them.
So this was kind of the more gut. So this image of the women, for me, had a relationship with something that had been haunting me for many years, which is the character, also British, of Ophelia in Hamlet. Who, yes, and nowhere in the world have people nodded as much.
They learn us at school here, I'm sure.
Yes, so for who doesn't know, Ophelia is the forgotten girlfriend of Hamlet, who drowns herself with flowers. And for me, the archetype of Ophelia was how I came to understand what my sister went through, what I went through, and what my mother went through, all in the transition from adolescence to adulthood, a feeling of drowning in your own emotions. And I never really wanted to make a film about Elena. I wanted to make a film that went at the nerve of that feeling, of this Ophelia complex.
Yes. Well, because I am a responsible human being and I'm looking at the time, I'm going to move us a bit more forward and talk. So your inspiration's always been Virginia Woolf and Shakespeare. That's not bad. But after making such a personal and intimate film, you decide to move from the very personal, right? From you, your sister, your mother, to the real big bad world.
So Elena was about how the personal is political in the sense that I'll just flash back a little.
Yeah, you can.
Of how my mother and my father fought against the military dictatorship in Brazil. They joined the Communist Party at the time, and she would say that when Elena complained about her emotional hardships, my mother would treat them as a bourgeois luxury. And
as it's called now, first world troubles.
Yes, and with her death, that took a completely different dimension, and emotions were not futile. They could take someone's life away, and the personal became deeply political. And flash forward a few years later, I was at the time, I felt that Brazil had a progressive government. I felt I could be like a Scandinavian artist looking at my own emotions deeply.
No offense if any Scandies are in the room, but you do have a good life, yeah.
And it was like democracy has been acquired, things are progressing. And suddenly, and I remember a few months before, I saw Patricia Guzman's masterpiece, The Battle of Chile. And I remember feeling jealous. I was like, I wish I had lived a time of such political intensity.
Big mistake.
Like, yeah, be careful with what you wish, because, yeah, 2 months later, we had these huge protests that took over Brazil, and I went to film. And that's the beginning, the genesis of Edge of Democracy, because I filmed a protest where people were asking for the return of the military dictatorship. And yes, so I felt the ground open underneath my feet. So we'll see a clip.
But wait, before the clip.
Okay.
I just wanted you, two things. I'm just reminding everyone again that this Edge of Democracy that Petra's mentioning nonchalantly was nominated for an Oscar. And it won a Peabody. So just bear that in mind before you watch the clip. And as you watch the clip, I'm using, further to what you've just said, I'm quoting Petra from her film saying, Brazilian democracy and I are the same age. She says that in the film. And I thought that at our 30s, we'd be on solid ground. I love that quote. So as you can see, there's a mix in Petra's films of the personal, the political, the archive verite, the classic political scenes with the very personal ones. Would you like to talk about the form and how you structure your films?
Mm-hmm. Okay. But before, I wanted to say just one thing, that I think what connects for me, Elena and Edge of Democracy, and the other films too, is that I really like to go to where it's painful, and either personally in the case of Elena, or socially in the case of this film, where this was not a pain that only I was suffering, but many people, with the idea that if you put enough attention into the pain, it dissolves. And it's not something mystical, right? Attention makes molecules move and brings movement. And I I feel that, at least for me, it resolves, the pain resolves. So right now when you're all in anxiety of the apocalypse, I feel I already went through it. So it's like
So it's a lesson you've taken from Elena into the edge of democracy and all the way to the apocalypse.
yes.
Okay.
About the form. About the form, I wanted to read a quote that from your Virginia Woolf, because yeah. So there's an essay called Modern Fiction where she says, "Look within, and life, it seems, is very far from being like this. Examine for a moment an ordinary mind. On an ordinary day, the mind receives a myriad impressions, trivial, fantastic, evanescent, or engraved with the sharpness of steel. From all sides they come, an incessant shower of innumerable atoms, and as they fall, as they shape themselves into the life of Monday or Tuesday, the accent falls differently from of old. The moment of importance came not here but there, so that if a writer were a free man," and here you can put a documentary filmmaker, were a free person, and not a slave, if he could write what he chose, not what he must, if he could base his work upon his own feeling and not upon convention, there would be no plot, no comedy, no tragedy, no love, interest, or catastrophe in the accepted style, and perhaps not a single button sewn on as the Bond Street tailors would have it. Life is not a series of jig lamps symmetrically arranged. Life is a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from the beginning of consciousness to the end."
Well done.
So for me, what I was always very interested in, she also describes, like, I want to capture reality with the thinness of, like, the skin of a grape. Something like that. I've never found that quote, but I read it once. And I think it's from her. And so I want to capture this thrilling moment, just document it, but I wanted to also share how it felt from the inside, right? To be there, in my guts. And that's what orients me, but it's a very hard and long process because that means I have to film, well, in the case of this film, we had to film it, and it went over for 3 years. The story was never ending. Like, one president would fall, and then the other one would fall. And so first we, and our amazing crew, our director of photography, João Atala, wanted to be in the streets, in the Congress, in the presidential palace, and have this three-dimensional portrait of a country falling apart.
With great division.
Yes, with great division. And then after digesting that with our amazing editor, first Jordana Berg, who went through and caught and found the material, what the material wanted to say, together with a group of amazing editors. And then once we looked at that, like 6-hour assembly, then I start writing. And I write with co-writers Tina Baz and David Parker in the case of this film.
Yes, there's quite a bit of voiceover in the films. And it's written beautifully. It's really gorgeous. Shall we watch the second clip from this film? Your access is incredible in the film. To her, to Lula, was it hard to get? It was very close.
Yes. So I asked Dilma for an interview in March, as soon as it became clear she was going to suffer an impeachment process. And her assistant said, like a few weeks later, that we could go to Brasilia and she would give us an interview. And then March went by, April went by, May went by, and we decided we were just going to interview her. We not necessarily wanted to film the entire impeachment process, but since we had to wait, we went into Congress, and got enveloped in a thrilling, terrifying, day-by-day rave, because these votes would go sometimes for 24 hours. They would go at one vote, I think. Yeah, we slept.
It's almost like a football match situation.
Yeah. And the whole country was entranced with it. It was really, it became a soccer, the energy of the soccer match. And so she only gave this, and then I had basically given up. And in July, when I was leaving, I got a call that she would give the interview. But that interview was horrible, and it's not in the film. It was in the presidential palace, very stiff, very boring. And so we filmed the whole year. We ended the impeachment vote, and when she basically was impeached and had nothing else to do, she accepted to give us another interview, and that's what this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was maybe because of your family connections.
No, my mother was affiliated to the Workers' Party, but she never had a position, and she was just like a militant. But it helped probably because they knew of her. They knew of her existence.
So you were the right side for her of the division.
Yes, but there were other filmmakers who got much more access than me.
Than you did.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about her and misogyny? What do you think about that?
Well, it's a big component. These men were having orgasms of taking the first female president out of power. And there's a moment in the film where I interviewed this guy, and it was like, why she's getting impeached? She said, she doesn't give us any hugs. You know, Lula came here, he gave us hugs. We would drink whiskey, and it's like
she's not part of the boys' club.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely that component too, but it's complex.
And so we were talking about your connections to her and to Lula, and I'd like to spend a moment also about your premise, or you not shying away about saying something and not being the ultimate objective. I'm a reporter I'm telling you the story as it really is happening. So you don't shy away from that. The left and right, it's very obvious what your bias is about. I personally love it. I hate it when, I appreciate it less when filmmakers, I got into trouble now myself, pretend that they know it all and they're bringing the full story. And then it works for me, at least, when I'm on your journey and you want to say something. But let's talk about your bias and you being courageous enough to talk about it as the film goes by as well, with your the voiceover.
Yeah, I because of this background in anthropology, when I first started to make a documentary, tried to make a documentary on the gentrification of Harlem, and then I started reading about representation, colonialism, and I was like, who am I as a white woman to talk about gentrification in Harlem? So it took me a while. I tried to change professions, didn't work out, and got back wanting to make something of which I felt intimately in touch with, like skin to skin. That I was not being a colonial portrayer of, and the anthropology as well dissolved any idea of objectivity, I think, in this discussion. To pretend you are objective is to actually impose your power on the person you are portraying. So what the most honest thing you can do is to open the crack of that, right? Not necessarily with voiceover. I mean, you can.
Yeah, of course, not only voiceover,
Yes.
it's where you put the camera and who you speak to, and yeah.
But I do love essay films, and Chris Marker, Agnès Varda, in Brazil, João Moreira Salles, Eduardo Coutinho. the principle of the essay, also in literature, that you are not affirming a thesis. I think what took me out of academia was this idea of a thesis. It was really, for me, felt like an aberration that you would look at something and conclude something. And so I hated that. And I love the idea of the essay, that what you're going to do is almost like massage whatever you want to portray rather than conclude.
Yes, but your style or your footprint is also to say it. So you don't pretend as well. You
Yes,
play the game
and
all
then
the
you
way.
feel
Yes.
what you have to say.
Yeah.
But but it changes, right? I began this film feeling things that they say the coefficient of transformation, who you are and who you end by the end of the film is, I completely transformed. I arrived here wanting to scream at everyone, and I left understanding
A bit,
the
yeah.
other side.
It's complex, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, because we don't have much more time for this film, I'm just going to ask you if you feel The Edge of Democracy is a bit of a cautionary tale for democracies everywhere.
Unfortunately, so yes. It is, and that's why I wanted to do it too. I decided to do it when Brexit happened. I read very great articles on Brexit, and I was like, wow, this man is feeling exactly what I'm feeling. I want to make a film about this feeling, this intangible feeling that we're feeling together. Yeah.
Yes. And then there are many more examples since then.
Yes.
So we're moving over to the current film, Apocalypse in the Tropics. Current meaning the film you can watch tomorrow, and the film that premiered in Venice and went on to Telluride, and you've been all over with it, right? But the big deal is that it's presented here, of course. And then later on, Netflix, right? When will it show?
July 14th. Yes.
Oh, yes. But it's not relevant for you because you're going to watch it tomorrow. So for other people,
Tomorrow at 8:30.
Yes, 8:30 tomorrow, and then those people who can't make it. Shall we start at the beginning of this film?
Yes.
The genesis of the film? Is that a
Yes.
pun? A dumb pun?
So what happens after democracy suffers a horrible crisis? God gets in the middle of it to save it. And this is what happened. As you see already in the scene that we played of The Edge of Democracy, of those men praying in the Senate, those are pastors that were convoked by a senator, an evangelical senator, to pray during the impeachment. And that was fascinating, and that and other things, and this scene, which you will see.
You'll see in a minute. But how many years passed from that impeachment till this film?
That impeachment was in 2016, and the scene that you will see in the beginning of this film was in 2017. But I decided to make this film in 2020.
All right. And did you read the Bible?
Yes. It took me 3 years. But after this, he asks me and the entire crew to close our eyes and to accept Jesus. And we all obey. And the women around him start hugging us. And that was a metaphysical moment I lived, because you can imagine filming in these corridors through this very aggressive moment of, it was the first hugs I received. So I think the contradiction of that moment, of suddenly obeying, of going into the Congress to discover what's happening to democracy, to be evangelized, and to like it, was what made me really want to make this. But I did not become evangelical. I did read the Bible because then I forgot about all this. It was that eventful. It was, I mean, life went on. But in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we started filming. I had promised I would not make a film about Bolsonaro, and had absolutely no desire. But living the worst crisis of our history with the worst president felt too eventful just to like sit by and relax. And it was, too painful not to do anything. And so we started filming, and it was really the material that directed us, because the evangelical presence was omnipresent. We started filming with Murilo Salazar in favelas in São Paulo, and it was the evangelicals that were helping, that were putting the ambulance into people's houses, that were giving emotional support. And some also saying not to wear the mask because Jesus cured AIDS and can cure COVID. So very contradictory positions. So we said, well, so let's make a film about this, but what? And Alessandro Rufino, the producer, suggested we interview Silas Malafaia, who had filmed in front of Congress, who is a pastor, the most important televangelist in Brazil. So we started interviewing him. We got access.
That's pretty incredible, this access to Malafau, because he's now from the other side, and you have incredible access to him.
He's been since 2014, before, But Alessandro had the great idea of inviting Ana Virginia Baluzier, who was a journalist that covers evangelicals for many years, who had a relationship with him, and who also, educated us in many levels. And so he let us in. And the fascinating thing was that as we filmed, his power only grew. He had anointed Bolsonaro as like the evangelical candidate, but he was just one of other pastors. And then, as in a chessboard, one by one, all the allies of Bolsonaro started to fall or die or betray him. And Malafaia was almost the only one left standing and really manipulating and orchestrating every move of the president. And what was fascinating as well was that there's one scene that I'm not going to show because
we don't have time,
but where by seeing the material, I realized that Malafaia, this pastor, was lip-syncing Bolsonaro, which through an entire speech, which you will see tomorrow, hopefully, and a speech where he's basically asking for a coup d'etat, for which he's now being tried and might go to prison in the fall, because he not only planned a coup when he lost the election, but the coup had promised it would also assassinate Lula, the vice president, and the judge of the Supreme Court.
And today the evangelists are huge in Brazil, right? There's at least 30% of the Brazilians.
Yes.
That's a big number.
Yes, and as I say show in the film, they grew from 5 in the 80s to 30%. And
so it's dramatic. And
yeah.
COVID helped that, you think?
No, it was during Lula's government.
Oh. Mm.
And many reasons. As I show in the film as well, we found these documents that show how the United States lobbying group, the Fellowship, was sending missionaries to Brazil to evangelize congressmen and Kissinger thought the Catholic Church had become a threat to the US interests in Latin America. So there were many factors that led to the growth. The left gave
Failed.
them many, no, allied with them for votes, gave them access to radio, television, and in the first opportunity they betrayed them. But what I also wanted to say is that in this film I was very interested in this image of Brazil. You know, Thomas More's Utopia, they say, was written based in an island in Brazil. So in Brazil as an utopia and a dystopia. And Brasilia was built as this idea of the utopic city that just forgot the detail that there would be people who lived there, who should live there, because it's a very uninhabitable city, our capital. And also this idea of Brazil as the country of the future, which relates a lot to Israel, because I'll get there. But Brazil, the country of the future, which was a book written by a Jewish man who escaped to Brazil, Stefan Zweig, during the Second World War, and wrote this book, Brazil, the country of the future, because here there's tolerance and multiculturalism and people don't kill each other. Well, they did, but he wasn't seeing it at the time, and for different reasons. But anyway, I grew up believing in this myth of Brazil, the country of the future. But in the idea of we will become the country of the future. We will become the developed country of tomorrow, right? And suddenly everything flips, and Brazil is the country of the future for the opposite reason. Because Europe is becoming like Brazil. The United States is becoming like Brazil, where inequality we are one of the most unequal countries in the planet, and most countries are becoming unequal and precarious, and as Brazil, or theocratic as Israel. So this is an article written by someone who they cite Israel as the example of this country of the future, but for the dystopic reasons.
Yes. So the dream is not doing very well right now.
Yeah.
No. The title of the film, how did you choose it? Why?
What made me want to make this film was the idea when I found out that apocalypse meant revelation. And that's what made the whole journey bearable. Because it was like being a witness to the end of the world, but knowing that there would be a revelation in witnessing this.
A bit of hope, you mean? No.
Yes, there is hope.
Yeah.
I think there is hope. There is a happy ending in the film, if you can notice it.
One day. Present tense. Yes, because if you watch the two films, you understand how we got here. The big question is how we get out of here. That's where we need to go. Okay, I am going to open up for questions. You can feel free to use the slider apparatus, but old school hands would work really well as well. If anyone would like to ask a question. Yes, go ahead there.
Hi, I was gonna ask because I'm a Brazilian as well, but I grew up outside of Brazil, and during the elections with Dilma, I remember very vividly there was a report on Globo. I don't remember who she was running against, but they were sort of listing the pros and cons of them. And I remember very vividly it being on Dilma as one of the cons at the very end, woman. Yeah, and I remember that stuck out so much to me because, well, I was outraged, and I was just kind of wondering what your experience was during that election as a woman, seeing all the misogyny come out and everything that was going on in Brazil. I don't really remember it very much, so I would really want to kind of see your perspective on it.
Yes. Yeah, there was a cover of a magazine that had her like opening her mouth like this and saying the hysteric outbursts of the president. And throughout the entire governance of Bolsonaro, the 4 years where he was speaking about golden showers and defecation and coups and tortures, there was no cover of any magazine that would be comparable. He was at most shown with, like, playing with G.I. Joes. But I think that has to do with misogyny, but that also has to do with the fact that Brazil has a press and a media landscape that is owned by 7 families, and they're all very friendly to the right and to the far right. They became a bit more critical of Bolsonaro after the pandemic.
Women in many countries are portrayed not in a very positive way. Seen the New Zealand Prime Minister with the way they portrayed her with her teeth.
And during Bolsonaro's government, the only journalist, or I included, like, filmmaker who were like criticized and destroyed in the internet were women.
Which should give every woman in this room motivation to do more. Do we have another question? Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's great that you managed to get the edge of democracy out when the likes of Netflix and the streamers were making more space for this kind of film, but it's even more amazing that now that the tendency is more towards the trivial celebrity and so on, how difficult and important is it that you've managed to get that space for these kind of stories, which have got such a small canvas to really spread now? That's, yeah. Firstly, congratulations, and secondly, please give us some tips.
Oh, yeah, I don't have to hold the microphone. For me, that quote of Virginia Woolf was also about that, about how horrible it is to have someone ask you, like, is this, I'm interested in true crime, celebrity, or sports. I die a little whenever I hear that. And I think if I had wanted to please after making The Edge of Democracy and only hearing, like, we're not doing political films, we're not doing political films, and even if everyone was saying that, and everyone continues to say that, and it's so disheartening. But it's really wonderful that this miracle happened, that our film found a home on Netflix. And I think there is still a space for these kind of films on Netflix, on other streamers. And it's testament to the idea of, like, if when you try to please, it's a recipe for failure. And when you, and I think documentary is like any art form, in the sense that it's about not this or that, but ultimately about what it is to be alive, what it is to die, and how to express things in new forms. So soundtrack for a coup d'etat, for example, Remy, who's the producer here, a film that reinvents the form of documentary while talking about another coup d'etat. So there is space. No other land, like, if you were, I'm gonna hear any distributor, right? Like, no, we would not touch Palestinian film, and then it goes so well in cinemas. So I think these rumors of what sells, what doesn't sell, if you follow that, it's really a destruction, first most of your soul. But it's hard. People have to survive. So.
Go ahead.
I'm interested to know more about your process for scripting your films. So for Elena, for example, you said you had 50 interviews, you went to the editor, and then came back and you wrote the film more personal. And then with The Edge of Democracy, it was more a case of you're filming a huge amount of footage, or 6 hours, I can't remember. And then you went on to write the film. So can you explain a little bit more your process for writing?
Yes. So in both cases, in all cases, I have the general idea. I write a little bit that idea, and then we go film, and film, then understand the material in the editing room and see what the material tells us. And in dialogue with the editor, so I really work very much in dialogue. I'm not at all an author that has an idea, brilliant idea by myself. Like, I work with amazing editors who help me make sense of what I want to say. Tina Bass, David Barker, Nels Bangerter, and before Jordana. And we create the story together. And then I understand what else I have to film that is missing. And the producers also are co-writers in most instances, and film more. And so, yeah, so it's a costly process, and that takes a long time.
But like most films, it's a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not the only one. I mean, everyone makes a film that way in the end of the day.
Well,
some people are more...
Hitchcock was different, no?
Yeah, there are some that know how to do it on their own completely. That is true. Very few. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for your films and your clips. I haven't seen them before, and so I'm really excited to looking and seeing the rest of your work.
Yeah, so Elena and Edge of Democracy are on Netflix.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And one of the things I was wondering about, because you're, particularly with Elena, is you're looking at very, very kind of personal moments. And I'm wondering, and I didn't feel in any way that your filmmaking is self-indulgent, but that's potentially a danger when we explore our own histories, that we get lost in our own histories, our own perspectives. And so I wondered how you thought about that, and how you managed to ground your films in a way that give you some sense that you're connecting to other people and other people's experiences rather than just your own.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Well, you haven't seen it. You might change your mind. But that, for me, with Elena and with the films that followed, one thing that drives me since the theater times is like, whenever you're shameful, yeah, that's a word, of something, you feel shame, go deeper, like expose that. That is where there's meat. And wherever there's pain as well, there's knots to be resolved. And joy, I mean, just these intense emotions. And it's a matter of intimacy, of going as deep as I can. I mean, that's at least how I like to approach my material.
I feel also honesty and integrity are part of it, sorry to say. I'm adding that on to the list.
But it's hard to say what makes it self-indulgent and what doesn't. I don't know. I think self-pity is really the greatest trap.
You have another question? Okay, we'll go there first.
Hi, Petra. Thank you so much for your films. I was wondering if after the huge success of The Edge of Democracy, if for making your Apocalypse in the Tropics, was it easier or more difficult to get access to contributors?
No, it was easier. It was very hard with Edge of Democracy. And with this film, we were a part of this amazing program called Catalyst. We also received the support of Chicken and Egg and these private investors who are Plan B, Illuminate, Play Action, and Impact Partners that really made, and InMat as well, the film possible in an amazing way, where we could do the whole film independently and sell after release in a moment where everyone was afraid of dealing. I mean, Bolsonaro was still in power, and we didn't want public funding.
And how about access? Was that easier or harder?
I didn't try to go to people who I knew wouldn't give me access. And in a way it was easier, contradictorily enough.
Okay, there was another question there. Yes.
Hi, Petra. I was wondering how you are able to find a balance between your own personal narrative or like your own personal thoughts and then the historical or like whatever you're trying to portray. Like, how do you find that balance?
Well, in Apocalypse in the Tropics, I don't talk about my personal life. I tried, or I really tried not to try, and then I tried. At first, I really did not want this new film to have voiceover. But then it became a film about how people move, in the sense of, yes, evangelicals are taking power, which is one of the themes of the film. But I was interested in what moves people. So what moves people to religious fundamentalism? What is moving the country into this political turmoil? And not just showing. So that's why, for me, it was important at the moment to add again the voiceover, which is really a pain in the ass because it's the most hard. You write and rewrite, and then you unwrite it. It's very exhausting. But I wanted to uncover the layers behind the scenes, like the layer. So we used paintings in the film. This was an idea from our editor, David Barker, because as I said, the word apocalypse was guiding us in this journey, and so we went to these because there's this crazy phenomenon. I don't know if you are aware of, but there are many people around the world that are praying for the end of the world as we speak.
Yes, Armageddon.
Yes, and yes. It's all connected to it.
Yeah. You know where the end of the world's going to be, where it's going to start. Just saying. Yeah.
So there's this very good film called Praying for Armageddon, and the other one, Till Kingdom Come, that show that the relationship between American evangelicals and Israel. And the same happens in Brazil, where, just to summarize, they believe that if the end of the world is accelerated, Jesus will return faster. So many Bolsonaro supporters in Brazil that are evangelical believe that. And Trump supporters in the United States as well.
That's tens of millions of people, unfortunately. Maybe more.
Mm-hmm. And so that layer of apocalyptic thought was important, and the way we portrayed it was through these apocalyptic paintings, which is a beautiful and horrible and terrifying, like the horror films from the past, of paintings of the apocalypse. And the first time I bought a book of paintings of the apocalypse, I had nightmares the entire night. And if you imagine the centuries that people had their unconscious inhabited by these images. And also, as I was saying, I don't know if I said this here, sorry. When you read the Bible, it's like seeing the world through an X-ray in a way, because there's all these layers that you have ingested from Western culture that are inhabited by the Bible, but you didn't really know, like Bach and Lars von Trier and Marx.
They've all read the Bible as well.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry.
There's a balance. Is there any other question? Yes, go ahead. Time for maybe two more.
Thank you so much, Petra. I'll try to formulate this question. It bounces a little bit off answers that you've given. But you said trying to please everyone is a recipe for disaster. You obviously have a very distinctive style and voice with your work. To me, every time I see your work and I hear you speak, it seems that you have a very clear and strong relationship with your instinct. Did you always have that relationship and conviction in the style that you chose and the work that you made? I just love to hear about instinct for you.
Well, I really hate all my films now, and I wish I had done completely different films from the films I made. But I do have a relationship to my instinct. It's not necessarily the right one in retrospect, but I think what I have is this idea that I'm only gonna make a film if I need to make it before I die, and that helps me. Because making a film is so horrible. It's like, as Ezra Edelman said, it's like willingly locking yourself in a box or in a room for 4 years, and you want to get out, and no one can open the door. And yeah.
Yeah, we're grateful that you lock yourself into your boxes every now and then, and we let you, you can have intervals in between to play before you lock yourself up again.
Yeah.
Do we have one more question? Anyone? Has it all been asked? Okay, so, what? Oh, you want one more, and then I have one. Okay, go ahead.
I know that you probably cannot tell us too much about maybe the next projects you are getting involved in, but I'm curious, what are the things that you're attracted to at the moment that you are wanting to explore?
Well, there's a constant dilemma that I have, because if I do feel that we're living this apocalyptic time and taking the luxury to make a film for another 4 years when everything feels so urgent. But in terms of projects, I'm attracted to making a film, a Western. I'll stop.
She admitted it. You're the first to know in the world. Or the second, maybe. Have you spilled the beans before?
No, but the masculinity is attracting me. Right? No, I'm kidding. Like, destroying that masculinity. No, I'm just
Okay. You just have to wait another 4 years when she gets out of her next box. Okay, I think this is a good note to end. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Petra Costa. Bravo.